Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name's Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker, licensed real estate broker in the state of California and member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, don't hold that against me. Welcome to it, folks. This week I had something I wanted to talk about that is related to what we're all going through in terms of the COVID-19 coronavirus. I've talked to a lot of folks, a lot of buyers and a lot of sellers, and some of the stories I've been getting from sellers have been kind of concerning. So I'm going to share with you what I've been hearing and what I've been seeing, but I also wanted to give you some feedback on why you shouldn't let yourself get talked into what I'm hearing from a lot of different folks. So let's start off with the topic, and the topic is pocket listings. So to get started, let's understand what a pocket listing is. Now, in the world of real estate, there are a pretty wide variety of ways that you can get your home marketed. And one of them is a pocket listing. And there are pitches that folks are going to hear, particularly folks out there selling, that you're going to hear from real estate agents trying to convince you that a pocket listing is the way to go. The truth is, a pocket listing is almost never the way to go. We'll talk about some of the very unique circumstances where I've done a pocket listing, and it's really hard to even call it a pocket listing, by the way I do it. But let's cover first what a pocket listing is. So a pocket listing is where a real estate brokerage, these are all observations that are coming from the state of California. You may be in a state where pocket listings or some of the things that surround or tend to orbit around a pocket listing aren't even legal. So what I'm going to be talking about is coming from the perspective of a California real estate broker. So your mileage may vary. If you're in another state that has a completely different way of handling these things, there are several things that are implied in a pocket listing that are bad news for sellers. Sometimes really good news for buyers, if that's the way it goes. But let's cover the basics of what a pocket listing is. A pocket listing is when a brokerage or a real estate agent under a brokerage has a listing, but they do not put it on the multiple listing service. They only use their own in-house advertising. So, in other words, only folks who are in contact with that brokerage or who are looking at marketing specifically put out by that brokerage are ever going to see that listing. So let's cover some of the basics of what the pros of a pocket listing are supposed to be. And we'll address all of those as we discuss pocket listings in more detail. Now, first, from the folks at moving.com, their first point is they get to maintain their privacy. That's a thing, right? And there are definitely circumstances where folks are not interested in having tons of people going through their home, and they want to keep things private. That's absolutely understandable. In an extreme case of that, maybe a pocket listing makes sense, but we'll also talk a little bit about how that doesn't really apply. Next, they may have the upper hand in price negotiations. I'm not sure why they think this is a pro. The presumption is that they're not desperate to sell. And my argument that we'll talk about in a minute would be that still does not work for you. If the idea is that you're not desperate to sell, that alone magnifies the benefit to you no matter what your scenario is, whether you're in a pocket listing or anything else. And in fact, hurts you in a pocket listing more than any other circumstance. I've had other agents give me arguments like it gives them more control over the listing. It allows them to cater more to the seller. All of those things are baloney. They are not catering more to their seller. In fact, they're hurting their seller far more than they're helping them. But let's get into why. Now, as I mentioned, a pocket listing is one where you don't end up on the MLS. And what I'm hearing now, these are the things that I'm hearing from folks now, how brokerages and real estate agents are selling the idea of a pocket listing to sellers by adding to this pros list that always has existed, regardless of what's going on out in the world. Some folks are telling folks that need to sell their home that by having a pocket listing, we can be as attentive to social distancing and accounting for COVID-19 and all these things, somehow linking a pocket listing with a higher level of safety as it relates to our current situation around the coronavirus. Another thing that I hear them talk about is not having agents just trampling through your home. We kind of covered that one in terms of maintaining privacy. But we'll also talk about how not going on the MLS has nothing to do with whether or not your privacy gets violated or you have people tramping through your home. So why do real estate folks encourage sellers to do pocket listings? What difference does it make to them if it's a pocket listing or not? Well, it all sort of orbits around this idea of dual agency. Now, that's the form that they would make you sign if you were doing dual agency. It's also called double ending. And what that basically means is that the agent who sells the home is also the agent who represents the buyer. So they're representing the buyer and the seller in the same transaction. That is perfectly legal in the state of California as long as everyone is disclosed to the fact that the agent works for both parties. One more thing that agents will use to try and push pocket listings is they will make an offer to their seller. They'll say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, I will list your home. We'll be able to do all these wonderful things that we've already talked about in terms of the benefits of a pocket listing. But in addition, because of how great this is, how wonderful pocket listings are, it really saves costs. So in addition to all the other benefits we've talked about, when I list your home, I will only charge you 4% commission for selling your home. Now, at that point, you might wonder, well, why would a broker or a real estate agent want to lower the commission if they're doing a pocket listing? Why would they encourage a pocket listing if they're going to get a lower commission? Well, to understand that, you need to understand two things. One, the commission is the total commission. So in other words, if you have someone listing your home and they're charging you 4%, under normal circumstances, that would mean that agent who's selling the home, who has the listing on the home, is only getting 2%. They're getting half of the commission. The other half goes to the agent that represents the buyer. And that's where the idea comes in that explains why brokerages and real estate agents are so enthusiastic about pocket listings. Since it's a pocket listing, that means that the entire commission is going to stay in the brokerage. And the motivation for the listing agent is to get that buyer themselves so that instead of getting half of the commission, they get all of the commission. So that's why they're willing to represent the property for 4%. Normally, if they do a 6% commission, which is, it's a negotiable number, but that's pretty typical. 6% is fairly normal in the real estate market. They would normally get 3%. Now, a lot of agents, in order to be competitive, because that's the kind of market we're in, will sometimes take a lower overall commission of, say, 5%. It's normally not much lower than that in the markets I see, although, again, it's a negotiable number, but that would mean 2.5% to each agent. In this scenario, they're maximizing the amount they make at the expense of the seller. Now, let's explain a little bit about what I mean by at the expense of the seller. So here's what we've established so far. A pocket listing is one that is held by an office or an agent that is only marketed or publicized through that agent or their office. Okay, it's not put on the MLS. It's not publicized to other agents. It is about directly marketing to consumers, to buyers who would want to purchase the home. All right, so that's number one. Number two, there are several reasons that are put out as good reasons to do a pocket listing. But none of those reasons actually serve the interests of the seller. And the number one reason why an agent would encourage you to do a pocket listing is so that they make more money at the end of the transaction. That's where the enthusiasm comes from. It is not about getting you the highest price and the best terms in the shortest time period possible. And now we're going to discuss why a pocket listing cannot achieve that. It cannot get you the best results as a seller in terms of getting your home sold. And by that I mean likely you'll get less money, it'll take longer to sell, and the terms you get may not be great. In the real bottom line, and there's all kinds of other little things that can affect the edges of your scenario, but in general, whether or not your home is going to sell is a mix of a couple of different factors. And one is, in the big general overview, is how many eyeballs will there be on your property? How many people will see your listing, your home for sale? The higher the number of people who see the property, the higher number of potential offers you will get. That's it. No other factors really come into play. There are other things that you can do, but the volume of folks who see the property is the key thing. So my argument would be all the things that a pocket listing would get from a brokerage, it should get anyway, whether it's a pocket listing or not. But always, in every single case, whatever a single brokerage can do in terms of advertising is going to be a smaller number than what they would be able to get to in terms of reach to potential buyers than if they listed it on the MLS. Because let's talk about the difference in these two scenarios. You list your home in a pocket listing, and maybe this office will put it on Zillow. They may. I've seen pocket listings where they don't, and I've seen pocket listings where they do. Now, that's a good thing because that's in the top 5 most popular real estate search sites. But it's not going to be on Realtor.com. It's not going to be on all the small MLS sites. It's not going to be on MLS listings here in Santa Clara County where I am. So no matter how you slice it, it's a smaller number than if you did go on the MLS. Now, whatever else they do, whether it's direct marketing, internet marketing, or marketing on Facebook or YouTube or whatever else they're doing, that's all great. But those are all advertising steps that should be taken by a real estate agent, regardless of whether or not it's a pocket listing. So all you're doing is in the list of ways that this real estate agent or brokerage is going to reach buyers, they're removing the MLS from that list. So they are reducing the amount of outreach that they're going to engage in to try to get your property sold. The truth is that anybody who wants to get their home sold should be very worried that they have a real estate agent who's working for them who is not putting their home on the multiple listing service. The multiple listing service isn't just a place where all of the properties end up being listed that should be listed. It's also a place where thousands, millions of other agents look for properties. It's really hard to overstate how much of a footprint the MLS has in terms of bringing folks to the table who are potentially going to want to buy your property. I mean, think about it. Do you want one agent in one office doing whatever advertising they can do direct to buyers, or do you want thousands, depending on where you're listing your home, hundreds of thousands of agents getting those properties in front of buyers? And think about who these buyers are. These aren't casual folks scrolling through listings in Zillow. These are folks who have committed to buying a home. In many cases, the folks who are getting the results from these searches aren't just real estate agents. I know for me personally, the folks who I'm representing as a buyer's agent right now have active searches with me that are done through the MLS. It's what they consult every day. They're given the ability to make notes about properties they like, to rank properties. So it's part of the process for buyers to be able to review properties through the MLS via their real estate agent. So by cutting out the MLS, you're cutting out a system that is used by millions of real estate agents who look for properties. You are limiting the access of buyers who are mostly, I know my buyers tend to be pre-qualified. The first step I put buyers through is to get pre-qualified by a lender so that we know exactly what we can afford to shop for and we can get all of those pre-approvals done. So the most qualified buyers are excluded from the marketing of your home with a pocket listing. So not only are you reducing the number of eyeballs, you're having a huge effect on the number of qualified eyeballs that are looking at your house. And that is the worst sin of all. And that's going to end up reducing the number of folks who are going to potentially make an offer on your home. And it's going to reduce the number of folks that might make an offer on your home who are actually qualified to buy it. Remember, the failure in escrows still continues to be focused on funding not coming through when people want to purchase a home. Why in the world would you want to cut short the single best source of qualified buyers that exists on the market right now? No other place is used as a tool where, not always, not 100% of the time, but you have a good chance that the buyers who are going to come look at your home have been pre-qualified by a lender. At least in my marketplace, that's pretty standard. So think about that. Pocket listings take all of that away from you. And with the market the way it is right now, that is a sacrifice you should not be willing to accept and you should not stand for. Now, if in terms of privacy for you, your concern is your neighbors not knowing, or for legal reasons or for whatever reason, you don't want the sale of your home to be public knowledge, absolutely. That would be a reasonable argument for doing a pocket listing. There are still ways you can even protect that to a certain degree. You can still put it on the MLS. On the MLS, you can keep it from being shared with all the other sites. You can continue to do the no sign on the property. You can continue to do the no lockbox. So you can go to some pretty great lengths to protect privacy in terms of doing that with an MLS listing. But yes, if you absolutely need that higher level of privacy, doing a pocket listing might just do it for you. Now, next on our list, they may have the upper hand in price negotiations. Now, the reason they say upper hand in price negotiations is they just say if they aren't desperate to sell their house, the buyer will likely have to meet their asking price. Well, what does that have to do with a pocket listing? Nothing, right? You can have that exact same mindset and still have your home in front of far more buyers. In fact, I would argue that the probability of you getting multiple offers that actually go up to or above your asking price, and just for the record, here in Santa Clara County, we are continuing to see homes that are listed on the MLS selling for over asking price by about 1% or 2%. So there is no argument for that, and the fact that we are seeing homes selling that are listed on the MLS for above asking price continues to indicate that that the maximum eyeballs you're going to get is critical to make sure that you put yourself in that scenario. My guess would be, if we could get statistics on pocket listings, my guess would be that the performance in terms of price would be far less. Simply because, and that's not just because of, even if you ignore the potential realities of the different skills of the real estate agents involved and just focus on the numbers, the supply number versus the demand number, you see that it's a situation with fewer eyeballs. Finally, the home doesn't have to sit on the MLS. I suppose this one has a grain of truth to it. That absolutely happens if a home stays on the MLS for an extended period of time. It does tend to get stale. Folks might ask why it's been on the market so long. So in my business, how do I handle situations where I get the buyer, right? That happens actually a lot more frequently than you would think. If I have a listing on a home and I get a buyer, what do I do? Okay, so as I've mentioned, there's the scenario where you hand it to another human being within the brokerage firm for them to take care of the buyer. And depending on where the scenario is when I encounter it, I'm okay with that. The spirit of this is protecting the fiduciary responsibility that an agent has to the client. So as long as there's another human being involved, that's great. For the most part, that's not what's happening with pocket listings out in the world. The agent is going into it specifically pushing for them to be the agent who represents both parties. But I have also had scenarios where when I was a singleton agent, remember I'm a broker, so I from time to time have agents working under me, but in times where I didn't, I would go out and find an agent that I trusted and give them a referral to the buyer who wanted to purchase my home and have them represent the buyer because I felt like that was the most ethical way to do it. Now in California, dual agency pocket listings, these are all legal things. In my opinion, double ending as a single human being representing both the buyer and the seller is not ethical. So I won't do it. It's hard to fathom how someone can make the argument that it is when the agent in that scenario knows the high and low limits of both parties. It's not a scenario where you can get your conflict of interest separated from these things and potentially do harm to one party or the other because you know what the other party will go up to or go down to. And frankly, I don't ever want to find myself going into a scenario like that because I want to get a bigger paycheck. I'd rather sleep well at night. So once again, primary motivation for folks to do pocket listings is because they lead to dual agency or double ending a transaction. In other words, the only person who really benefits from a pocket listing, which ends up in dual agency, is the brokerage and the agent. That is it. There is almost no scenario, aside from the few that we've talked about, where it would make even the slightest amount of sense to allow a pocket listing that would end up with your agent representing you and the buyer. Okay, as always, folks, the goal here is to leave you with more information on the table than I've taken up in your time. I hope that that's been true today. Thanks again for listening. I hope everyone stays healthy, and I'll talk to y'all next time.